Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here, with the 50th episode of our quick match gameplay. This is going to be a double feature, both games with vampire accounts, both trying out some new stuff. This first one on the map Pillars of Bone, against the Warriors of Chaos led by Athelstan. As you can see, I am running Helmet Ghorst, and so I wanted to do a kind of a double feature, just doing some less popular heroes and their lores and try them out. So right off the bat you can see this is a pretty short game, but Helmet Ghorst here is the lord I picked, and wanted to give him a shot. He's probably one of the least popular vampire lords out of all of them. The only one that's possibly less picked being a generic necromancer, and that's because he's widely considered to be pretty terrible. But I want to give him a shot. When he's mounted on the brothers Ghorst cart, he's basically a very slow Mortis engine with slash corpse card hybrid. He does AoE damage, he has Vigor Mortis, he has a Reliquary of Corruption here doing damage, and of course the Unholy Lodestone, which means that he's healing everything in the AoE. He's also capable in Quick Match of summoning Graveguard or a White King if overcast, so that's what I did. I decided to bring Awaken from the Grave, Van Hell's Dance Macabre, and Invocation of Nehek. He also comes, of course, with the Undeath Resurgent, which is basically a Stand Your Ground knockoff, and Liber Noctis, which is his unique item, and it apparently causes self-damage and improves his power reserves and power recharge rate. Unfortunately, I don't get to test it out in this game. He is backed up by a Vampire of Death on foot. Vampires are very powerful melee lords. They provide that encouragement to all nearby units, and to top it off, they're a spellcaster, so on top of being tanky and dishing out a lot of hurt, they are capable of doing magic. So this one comes in with most of the items, both the utility spell, or two of the utility spells, Aspect of the Dread Knight and Doom and Darkness, as well as Spirit Leech and Fate of Bunok, because I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to face, given that this was Chaos, and Chaos has quite a lot of variety they can bring. My front line is entirely composed of Graveguard with great weapons, 5 units of them, because of course I was expecting a lot of armor, most likely Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and they are backed up by 2 units of Skeleton Spears. Of course these guys are anti-large, and they're pretty dirt cheap, so I figured that I'll use them to stop enemy Chaos Knights, or large units like Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. And then out on the flanks, more anti-large, 2 units of Blood Knights, and these guys should trade pretty effectively with anything Chaos brings. My opponent came in with Kolek Suneater as his lord, and he actually didn't bring Soul Crusher, the Warhammer, or Star Crusher, I do believe it's called, something like that. He only brought Lord of the Storm, Furious, or Deadly Onslaught, and Foeseeker. Alongside him, he did bring the Summoners of Rage, which is a regiment of renowned Dragon Ogres, who can drop Chain Lightning at a pretty high melee stats. Then behind that, his front line is entirely composed of Chaos Marauders, most likely expecting to be fighting a lot of skeletons. And then a unit of Forsaken. The Forsaken are a little bit of a strange pick since there's no backline for him to really go for. Though they would perform well against skeletons, but against, given that I'm bringing a lot of Graveguard, they don't have so much of a chance. Then a Sorcerer of Shadows coming in with the Withering and Pit of Shades. Over here, Aspiring Champions, and then 2 units of Chosen with Halberds, just to kind of cover his backline, stop any large I might bring, and to beef up that front line with leadership while Kolek runs ham in my backline. And then over here, Cannon, which is already taking pot shots at my army. And it's going to land a nasty, meaty hit right in the middle of my Graveguard with great weapons, and as you can see, I'm immediately down about 8 models. So quite a bit of a strong hit there. Now, in the meantime, though, my army is just pushing forward. I'm simply planning to engage here along the whole frontage. My opponent did not spread his units out as much as I did, so I actually have pretty wide frontage. Over here you can see my Blood Knights engaging Kolek, or on the other flank Blood Knights are engaging Summoners of Rage, and I'm managing to pincer him with the Spears, which will help me greatly, while my opponent is not in position to support his large units with his own anti-large that Chosen with Halberds. My opponent does plow through with his Chaos Swords of Shadows, perhaps thinking my Vampire of Death is going to be an easy victim, but that's really not the case. Although she doesn't get the charge off, Vampires are really solid melee combatants. It's comparable to, say, a Branch Wraith, as far as just straight up damage goes. Here you can see an Overcast goes of Doom and Darkness goes off, which is helping break these guys. And shortly, at first they're wavering right now. I do get a flank charge in with Blood Knights. They aren't quite broken, but they should pretty shortly. Of course, all undead units do cost Tiff here, and so these guys really can't hold up. Over here, I did raise not dead. I raised Graveguard, and which I guess are dead, and I'm coming into the back of these Chaos Marauders and forcing them to break, which means that my opponent's entire front line, which is composed of pretty cheap chaff infantry, is now just falling apart with these rear charges, the flank insecurity, and all that stuff. Over here, a Withering does go down. In the meantime, the Summoners of Rage have massacred them. Man, the cannon is being body blocked by its own models, or by its own allies. And over here, the Blood Knights have kind of gotten a recharge off and kind of broken my opponent's backline. Over here, the Vampire, of course, the Vampire of Death, Vampires do have this ability that you can leave on them, the Immortal Will, which allows them to replenish quite a bit of HP in a fairly short amount of time. So I actually used that after that miscasted Overcast. and actually beat up on this Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows. And of course, you can see he's having his HP drained by the proximity of Helm and Ghorst. And that was actually the end of the game there. My opponent decided to just leave because he had very little left. He had his Kolek was really mauled, Chosen with Halberds were still around, and the Hellcan was still around. That was just about it. I think the Aspiring Champions. But given how healthy my Graveguard line still was, and I still had Blood Knights on the field, it wasn't a good situation for him. So pretty quick match. It was pretty fun to test out Helm and Ghorst. I didn't get to try out the Liber Noctis. I'm not entirely sure how strong of an item it is, and yeah, I just didn't get to try it out, unfortunately. Hopefully I'll get another chance to do it. Helm and Ghorst is kind of cool because I do usually bring an Unholy Lodestone in all my armies anyway, just as kind of a support unit because it buffs up your unit. Fairly low combat stats of your skeletons to a very respectable level. So it's kind of cool that he combines both the Corpse Guard with the Unholy Lodestone with a Lord. At the same time, he's pretty pricey when you put him on the Corpse Guard. And so he's not like a dirt cheap option like Kemmler is. Kemmler can come in and easily around 1,500, maybe give or take, gold. Helm and Ghorst is well over 2,000 if you put him on a Corpse Guard and bring the spells that I brought, as well as Liber Noctis. So he's really not a cheap Lord option. And given that he can't fight at all, it is a bit of a hefty expenditure. So I wouldn't say he's like necessarily a competitive pick, but you can obviously make it work, and I had some fun putting those Graveguard behind my opponent's lines. Graveguard with rare weapons, of course, will trade very well with the Chaos Marauders, but they would have traded well even if my opponent had brought, for example, Chaos Warriors. And of course, the Blood Knights absolutely thrashed the poor Summoners of Rage, and Kolek actually gave him quite a bit of a bloody nose too. And the Spears provided some support. So I think this was a very solid build. The Vampire of Death, the Doom and Darkness, once again showing its utility. I've been making more and more use of these utility spells that just don't get any recognition, I think, or as much recognition. I've been trying to make more and more use of them, and I'm really finding them to be very nifty. So we're going to hop on over to another game, and this one I'll also be running a bit of a unique Lord. So I'll skip right over to that. So here we have a second matchup. This time around I am running same thing, the Vampire Counts, of course, against Norska this time around. It was led by Dum on the map Prague, and a bit of a troll build this time around. I'm running Strigoi Ghoul King for my front line, and so throwing things into slow mo a little bit because this is a fairly quick match, but at the same time, so I decided I know that there are one of the big problems for Vampire Counts when fighting against the Norskins is the Mammoths. Mammoths do a lot of damage. They have a lot of HP, and Norskins don't have a ranged option to shut them down. Or sorry, the Vampire Counts don't have a ranged option to shut them down. So you don't have too many options. You can run a horde of Skeleton Spears. You can try Blood Knights, so they're very cost inefficient. Hex Wraiths and Cairn Wraiths are fairly functional, and as are Crypt Horrors. Those are probably your two best bets. But I wanted to try out something new. I wanted to try out, because I was bringing the Strigoi Ghoul King, of course, on his Terrorgeist. I decided to bring a Terrorgeist Goon Squad here. So 2 Terrorgeists and a Strigoi Ghoul King on his own Terrorgeist. And so, real quick, running over the Strigoi Ghoul King, another kind of underutilized or unpopular Lord. He does have a bonus against large, and of course armor piercing when mounted on his, and he actually has armor piercing even on foot. But he does cause poison damage, which is pretty cool. That'll help mitigate my opponent's strength. He does have a mix of death and vampire magic, and so I brought him in Spirit Leech, Invocation of Nehek, and Doom and Darkness. Once again, that fancy utility spell. And he does have an ability called Bloodlust, which gives him allows him to cast a bonus to armor piercing on any nearby ally. I usually end up using it to buff the Strigoi Ghoul King himself. He's of course coming in with his little goon squad of 2 Terrorgeists. These guys are very pricey, though they did go down in price in the recent batch. They do have regen, and they do cause poison as well. So they're kind of. I'm hoping this will be my kind of goon squad and just kind of gank enemy monsters. Behind that, my army is very simple. It's a front line of 5 Graveguard, backed by 4 Skeleton Spears, and in the center of this, in the heart of the force, is a Corpse Guard with an Unholy Lodestone, which of course provides regen to all nearby units, and provides Vigor Mortis, which makes all the units near it fight a little better. And my opponent brought a fairly conventional, I think, Norscan build. He brought 5 units of Marauder Berserkers, and I don't believe the Regiment of Renown is in here, actually. Then 2 units of Skin Wolves with Armored Skin Wolves. He did, of course, bring Wulfric with his ship and Hunter of Champions. Though no stand your ground by the look of it, definitely stripped down quite a bit. Shaman Sorcerer of Metal with Final Transmutation and try to show what that other ability is. And Plague of Rust. And I'm forgetting the name of it. And a Skin Wolf Workin. And interestingly enough, I think this is a bit of a strange choice. Decided to run Ruinous Flesh. This is mostly useful for the missile resistance. The armor's not bad, of course, because it's a 9 to 18% increase in your damage reduction against non-armor piercing, but nonetheless, I think it is a bit of an interesting choice since I don't have any missiles. And of course, this feral mammoth over here and Wolfric being on mammoths will cause me a bit of a pain. One unit I actually forgot to mention because they were off here in the woods was a dire pack, which are the regiment around dire wolves. I was expecting some skirmishers, and that is one of the big problems with bringing crypt horrors, for example, or large units in general against Norskins, especially when I didn't bring anything to raise dead or raise crypt ghouls in the case of the Strigoi Ghoul King. I'm not really able to shut down the skirmishers all that efficiently, so that's why I brought the dire pack. But my opponent didn't bring any skirmishers, so I kind of didn't really have too much of a use for him. In the meantime, though, I'm kind of pushing forward. My opponent is pushing forward a little bit as well. Marauder Berserkers, of course, pushing up. These guys do trade very well with skeletons, and I found that a lot of undead players tend to bring like a very cheap, chaff-heavy army when they play as undead. And the result is that some of these units, like Marauders or or Marauder Berserkers, and all those sorts of units, actually perform really well against undead. And so what I've been doing lately is I've been bringing Graveguard if I have to fight them. Graveguard are just they're fairly cheap, and they have bonus against infantry and very high armors plus silver shield, so they're just very well rounded. Now my opponent immediately does cast, and I'm not entirely sure. I forget if this was overcast or just single cast. He does overcast the final transmutation, which is a huge investment in Winds of Magic. And the Strigoi Ghoul King actually has a lot of HP. Not actually quite as much as a normal Terrorgeist, but he does have well over 4,000. So while this is definitely a hefty bit of hurt, I do manage to pull away with the Strigoi Ghoul King. It takes about a third of my HP, and it's not too big of a loss. Neither of my two Terrorgeists got hit by it. My Dire Pack over here is kind of sitting off to the flank, and the Mammoth has charged in. And I immediately decide to goon it. I jump in with the Strigoi Ghoul King, I jump in with the two Terrorgeists, and we're just kind of mobbing this poor guy. The Mammoths have very low morale, especially the Feral Mammoths, so they should break pretty quickly. You can see the Strigoi Ghoul King over here did pop Bloodlust on himself, so he's just dishing out a lot of hurt, and this Mammoth's already going down like a 9-pin. Wolfric has pushed through my line over here, so what I'm doing is I'm running away with the Corpse Cart. Of course, it goes very slowly, but as long as my opponent does not finish it, or chase it, I should be able to just block it with these Graveguard, block it with the Spearmen, and prevent it from doing too much. I drop a Spirit Leech on Wolfric. It is a bit of a waste, because he has a lot of HP, but I was trying to get some damage in. And in the meantime, I did cast an Invocation of Nahek unit in the center, and you can see I've shattered the Feral Mammoth. So that's definitely a big win there. One of my bonus core units is already off the field. In the meantime, though, my Graveguard are doing okay. One of the big problems with and the Skeleton Spears, though, are going to get trashed pretty badly by the Berserkers. That's definitely one unit they will do very well against. One of the big problems, and here you can see Strigoi Ghoul King and the Terrorgeist are just diving in on Wolfric and beating him up. Pull the Strigoi Ghoul King up right before the Armored Skin Wolves hit. Because I don't want him getting torn apart. If I lose my leadership, I'm going to lose completely. Normally I bring more supporting lords so that my leadership isn't as under threat from snipes, but in this case I didn't, so it's very important that I keep the Strigoi Ghoul King alive. Now over here I dive into the back of Wolfric, going for a rear charge. And you can see Wolfric is definitely dropping pretty quickly, but here he drops Hunter of Champions on the Strigoi Ghoul King, which means he's going to be moving very slowly. He has practically no armor and no melee defense, so he's just going to get pretty quickly annihilated. Fortunately, though, my Terrorgeists are on top of Wolfric, and I actually, even at this point, I'm so desperate that I'm even going to be moving my Corpse Cart into position to try to block and shield my Strigoi Ghoul King. Fortunately, there's poison coming down from these Terrorgeists, so Wolfric is actually being slowed by quite a bit as well. Over here on the flanks, the Marauder Berserkers are not doing well against the Graveguard, but unfortunately, because my micro isn't too on point, the skeletons are getting slaughtered. And the skeleton spears, if I was more on top of my micro, I would pull them away, and that way I wouldn't lose this fairly important and critical portion of my army when it comes to dealing with large units. Over here, the Strigoi Ghoul King is in critical condition, and he's just barely crawling away, just barely alive. I don't have any way to heal him. One of the big problems with the Strigoi Ghoul King is that he doesn't have Arcane Conduit, and he has no way of quickly regenerating Winds of Magic, which means that his magic is a bit lackluster. Over here, though, Wolfric is also pretty badly beat up. And I'm trying to kind of pursue him with the Terrorgeists and all that sort of stuff. Fortunately, the Terrorgeists are pretty... they have their own regen, so I don't have to worry too much when it comes to healing them. Here, I do get my Strigoi Ghoul King off the ground. He is getting very badly mauled. He is dying, and he's actually, despite the fact that we killed Wolfric, his leadership is so low that he is still dying. But over here, I do dive in, trying to finish off this Werkin. Meantime, my entire front line has kind of begun folding over, because my opponent got those flanks, and of course, Skin Wolves with armor will do very well against Graveguard. Or actually, pretty well, maybe not very well. Now, fortunately, I did get an Invocation of Nahek on the Strigoi Ghoul King, but right as my opponent cast a Transmutation of Lead on my army here. So the Strigoi King is healing a pretty decent amount. The Terrorgeists are still healing on their own, and you can see over here we did manage to rout off the Skinwolf Werkin, and now I'm diving after the Shaman Sorcerer of Metal. This was a bit of a waste, I think, because he's spent most, if not all, of his Winds of Magic at this point, and he probably doesn't have much left. But I do get a little bit of damage into him, so definitely a nice little bit there. Here you can see got Wolfric laying around like a corpse. Most of my army though at this point is falling apart. Just barely being kept around by the corpse guard with corpse guard over here, and I'm just very desperately just trying to at this point to snipe off my opponent's lords, because I'm realizing that my infantry contingent is not going to stick around long enough to get the win. I am trying to kind of split off my Terrorgeist, sending one Terrorgeist over here. You can see it instantly assassinates that poor Skinwolf, drops another one dead. That's one of the nice things about Terrorgeist. They instantly kill some of the units like this heavy cavalry, like say, I do believe they instantly kill, for example, Demigryph Knights, and they'll the models. And definitely something like Skinwolf Werkin, they'll do a good job against. Here I'm chasing off this Shaman Sorcerer and actually finish him off, so this Terrorgeist has done his job really well. Unfortunately, I'm losing my infantry like flies. And now I'm sending the Strigoi looking back. I failed to assassinate the Werkin, who has regen, of course, so he's still healing up. And I'm not entirely sure how close he is to his regen cap. We can check it here. Unfortunately, it's a little inconvenient. Yeah, he still has a respectable amount of HP, well over half his HP to regen. Over here, my opponent is kind of moving into pincer me. You can see the corpse guard is taking a lot of the aggro here. There's very little spears left, but I'm throwing them into the meat grinder here, just trying to tie down these berserkers as my Terrorgeists take off the ground, because I'm trying to. This is at this point my main contingent. This is my main hope for any sort of victory. I'm diving in on the Werkin. This is my opponent's last source of leadership and encouragement, so that is who I'm trying to hit. I'd hit him with a Spirit Leech, hoping to bust through that regen. As you can see, unfortunately, he's getting thrown about. He's not the biggest of models, so the Terrorgeists are kind of throwing him around rather than just murdering him. But now he is terrified. A lot of these other units are getting terrified, and they're routing. That was actually something I missed in one of the earlier portions of the game. I did actually cast the Doom and Darkness, and I broke part of my opponent's army over here on the right flank, and it actually helped save my entire center for a little bit. So it ends up with being a Pyrrhic victory. I only had a handful of spears at the land there, the Corpse Cart, and of course the Goon Squad of Terrorgeist. So that was a pretty fun game. Now, once again, I wouldn't recommend this from a competitive standpoint. The Terrorgeists, I'm not entirely sure. The Terrorgeists are okay. They definitely did a great job of helping my opponent's units down. The Ghoul King himself, I wouldn't necessarily recommend. The problem with the Ghoul King is that while he does have regen, a very hefty amount of HP, and causes poison, and has armor piercing and all that sort of stuff, anti-large bonus, he has no. He can't chant. He has no sort of. He has nothing like Arcane Conduit. He's not really capable of healing. He doesn't have a cheap raised dead option. His only raised dead option raises Crypt Ghouls, and it costs I think about 11 Winds of Magic, which is rather inconvenient. And his armor's kind of mediocre. Doesn't have the best of melee combat stats. They're not terrible given that he's poisoned, so he's going to be weakening his opponent at the same time. But he has quite some issues, in my opinion, and it's definitely, in my opinion, more worthwhile to run a vampire. If you're going to run a lord on a big bulky mount, it's generally better to run a vampire. Someone like Manfred, and if you want the mix of death and vampire magic, then generally someone like Manfred's going to be a better pick. But it was definitely a bit of fun trying him out, trying to make him work, especially against Norska, which is probably, in my opinion, probably the toughest matchup right now for vampire counts. One of the big things I think, definitely if you're going against Norska, is bring Graveguard. They cost the same as Marauder Berserkers, and they will out-trade them very effectively. Now, it wasn't quite visible in this game because the Skinwolves diving into the backline constantly caused a lot of disruption and hit the Graveguard. Plus, I wasn't able to keep my Corpse Cart with the Unholy Lodestone on top of the Graveguard the whole time. But with a more conventional comp, for example, with a White King in the mix or something like that, the Graveguard will trade incredibly well with Marauder Berserkers. They'll trade well with them even if they don't have the boosts. And really, the only reason these guys they kind of just started disintegrating because the Strigoi King wasn't there. That's why normally when I'll run multiple leadership units, I'll run, say, a Lord and then 2 White Kings, for example. So that way I can distribute leadership and encouragement across the line, and that way you don't really get these crumbling issues. And that's what happened here, really, because especially from the recharges from the Skinwolves. And of course I really messed up with the Spearmen. The Spearmen were meant to counter the Skinwolves and the Mammoths, and instead they ended up fighting Berserkers, which is an absolutely atrocious matchup for him. Skeleton Spears and the Skeletons should not be fighting Berserkers. Berserkers are a unit that absolutely chews through squishy units. There's only a handful of units that are better, in my opinion, at tearing through squishy infantry than Berserkers, and that's like really only like Forsaken and maybe War Dancers. That's a big maybe. These guys are just really good, and against squishy infantry, so I made a huge mistake by committing my Spearmen against them. I also messed up with the Dire Pack and got them caught up against the Berserkers when I should have pulled them back and either used them on the Mammoths or more likely on the Skin Wolves. Even though they don't have anti-armor, they have a pretty solid anti-armor bonus, or anti-large bonus, so they could have been good there. But yeah, great game to my opponent. It was really close. You can see it came down absolutely to the wire. My army was practically annihilated at the end of that. And my opponent actually had a much more significant battlefield presence than I did. But definitely a lot of fun. Got to try out Terrorgeist spam. Got to try out a Strigoi Cool King. I hope you guys enjoy these videos. I hope it maybe gives you some ideas if you like running some strange comps or like testing out different heroes or lords and don't like running the same stuff over and over. Be sure to try stuff out. The Strigoi Cool King's pretty cool. Ghorst is pretty cool in their own right. Just gotta make sure to build around their strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was the 50th one, so hopefully we'll have many more to go, many more quick match videos to come. As usual, if you have any comments, criticism, any questions about quick match, any questions about Total War Warhammer in general, anything like that, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. And as usual, I appreciate you all for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Wyvern out.